The alarm in the lecture hall cut off mid-tone, and 42 students went silent at once. My name is Leora Vantel, and I remember every second of that day because it changed how I saw an entire species. We were seated in the grand auditorium of the Concordance Fleet Academy, a place built to hold representatives from 19 worlds, and the air still carried the sharp smell of the emergency drill that had just ended. Professor Amice Dole stood at the front, her 4 clawed hands folded, her patience famous across every department. She did not look shaken by the alarm. She looked like she had been waiting for silence the entire time. At her side stood a sealed case, black and reinforced, the kind used only for artifacts too old and too fragile for casual handling. None of us had been told what was inside. That uncertainty alone had kept the room tense since the moment we walked in. I glanced toward the back row, toward the only human in our cohort. His name was Kellen Ashworth, and in 3 cycles of study, I had never once seen him raise his voice, argue a point, or ask for attention. He sat quietly, watching the case the way a person watches a storm they already expect to pass. Professor Dahl placed both hands on the case and opened it without ceremony. The room reacted before she said a single word. Inside, resting on dark cloth, was a blade unlike anything in our archives. It was long, curved with a precision that looked drawn rather than forged, and the metal itself seemed to shift color as the light touched it, folding shadow into brightness in narrow lines. It did not look like a tool. It looked like something that had been given thought, given care, given purpose beyond its shape. A low murmur rushed through the hall. 2 Dranai students beside me made a sharp clicking sound, the sound their kind makes when something feels wrong to them. My roommate Sarah, an oven with a calm temperament, actually pulled back in her seat as if the object itself carried weight she did not want near her. Professor Dole lifted the blade with both hands, holding it flat, letting everyone see it clearly. This object was recovered from Earth, she said, long before humans joined the Concordance. It carries no power source, no digital record, nothing but metal and history. And yet look at the reaction in this room. Half of you have gone still. Some of you look uneasy. I want to understand why. Nobody answered. She turned toward the back of the hall. Cadet Ashworth, please come down. Every head turned at once, and I felt the tension in the room shift entirely onto him. Kellen rose from his seat without hesitation, but without rushing either. He walked down the steps at a steady pace, calm in a way that felt strange given how the rest of us were reacting. When he reached the front, Professor Dahl extended the blade toward him, handle first. I expected him to step back. Humans, from what little history we studied, were often described as a species uncomfortable with their own past, quick to explain away the darker chapters of their history whenever those chapters were brought into the light. I expected apology. I expected distance. Instead, Kellen took the blade with both hands, and something in his posture changed the instant his fingers closed around it. His shoulders settled, his breathing slowed. He turned the blade slightly, checking its balance the way someone checks the weight of a familiar object rather than a strange one. Then, without being asked, he lowered his head toward it in a short, precise motion, a gesture of respect, not fear. The room went completely silent. "May I speak?" he asked Professor Dole. She nodded, and I noticed something rare cross her expression, genuine curiosity. Kellen turned to face all of us, the blade resting steady across his palms. "I know what most of you are feeling right now," he said. "Discomfort, maybe even distrust. You are looking at an object built for conflict, and you are wondering how a person could look at something like this and feel anything other than shame." He paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to hold our attention without losing it. "But I think you are misunderstanding what you are looking at." He turned the blade slightly, letting the light travel down its edge. This was carried by a group of warriors from a small island nation on Earth, a very long time ago. They lived by a strict code, one built around discipline, patience, and restraint. A blade like this could stay untouched for years. Its purpose was not to be used often. Its purpose was to remind the one who carried it of the responsibility they held. Sarah, beside me, leaned forward slightly, listening. "You think decoration on a weapon means a culture loved conflict," Kellen continued, "but it is often the opposite. A group comfortable with careless conflict does not need ceremony. It does not need patience, or training, or years spent learning when never to act. This blade was shaped with care because the people who carried it understood exactly how serious their choices could become, and they refused to treat that lightly." He turned the blade once more, showing the layered pattern folded into the metal. "Every line here represents a decision. Every curve represents restraint. This was never meant to be feared. It was meant to be respected." He lowered his head again, a short, controlled motion, and returned the blade to Professor Dole, handle first, exactly as he had received it. For a long moment, nobody in the auditorium moved. Then Professor Dole did something I had never seen in 3 cycles of her teaching. She smiled, fully, without restraint. "Thank you, Cadet Ashworth," she said. "That is the clearest explanation I have heard in 40 years. She turned back to the class. "This is what I wanted you to understand, not the metal, the mind behind it. I thought the moment would end there, quietly, the way most lessons ended. I was wrong." A sharp tone interrupted the hall again, this time not a drill. Professor Dole's console lit with a red marker, and her expression shifted instantly from calm to alert. "All cadets, remain seated," she said, her voice steady but firm. "This is not part of the lesson." The doors at the back of the auditorium sealed with a heavy sound, and the lights dimmed by half. My pulse quickened. Around me, students exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether this was another test or something real. A voice came through the room's speakers, calm but urgent. "Security breach detected in the lower archive. All personnel are advised to hold position." The lower archive was 2 levels beneath us, the same level where rare historical items, including the blade now back in its case, were normally stored before being brought up for lessons like this one. Professor Dole closed the case quickly, locking it with a firm motion. "Everyone stay calm," she said. "This building has protocols for situations like this." But her eyes moved to Kellen, just briefly, and I noticed it because it was so unlike her usual composure. The lights flickered once, then steadied. A low hum spread through the floor, the sound of the building's defense systems activating. I had heard about these systems in theory, but never once in 3 cycles had I heard them engage for real. "What is happening?" Sarah whispered beside me. I did not have an answer. Kellen remained standing near the front, watching the sealed doors with the same steady focus he had shown while holding the blade moments earlier. He did not look afraid. He looked alert, the way someone looks when they are paying close attention rather than panicking. Professor Dole touched her console again, reading something quickly. "There has been an unauthorized attempt to access restricted archive systems," she said. "Security is already responding. I need everyone to remain exactly where you are." A murmur of concern moved through the room, quiet but clear. Several students shifted in their seats. The Drenai twins clicked rapidly, a sound I now understood as genuine unease rather than simple discomfort. Then the console chimed again, and Professor Dole read the update with a visible change in her posture. "The intrusion has been isolated to a single access point," she said. "No physical presence detected inside the building. It appears to be a remote attempt, already being traced." The tension in the room eased slightly, though not completely. I found myself watching Kellen, curious about how someone could remain so composed through both the artifact and the alert without any visible strain. He caught my gaze and offered a small, reassuring nod, as if to say the situation was already under control, even though none of us could know that for certain. Minutes passed in near silence, the only sound the low hum of the building's systems working through their checks. Then the lights returned to full brightness, and the heavy doors at the back of the hall opened with a soft mechanical sound. Professor Dole read one final update, then turned back to the class with visible relief. "The intrusion attempt has been fully contained," she said. "No items were accessed and no one was harmed. Security believes it was a test of our systems, nothing more." A collective breath moved through the room, tension draining from every seat. Professor Dole looked toward Kellen once more. "Cadet Ashworth, your composure during that alert was noted. Most cadets your age would have reacted differently." Kellen offered a small shrug, modest rather than proud. "Staying calm helps more than reacting fast," he said simply. "Panic rarely solves anything." The simplicity of his answer struck me more than anything else that day. It matched everything he had said about the blade only minutes earlier. Control, patience, restraint. It was not something he had only spoken about in theory. It was something he clearly practiced, without needing anyone to notice. Professor Dole allowed the class a short break before resuming the lesson, and most students used the time to talk quietly among themselves about what had happened. I found myself walking toward Kellen instead, curious rather than cautious for the first time since I had met him. "You did not seem surprised," I said. "Not by the blade, and not by the alert." He considered the question for a moment before answering. "I try not to let fear decide how I react to something," he said. "Fear makes people move too fast, or freeze completely. Neither helps." "Where did you learn that?" I asked. "From history," he said. "From people who carried something like that blade and never had to use it, because they trained themselves to think clearly before anything else." I found myself nodding, understanding a little more about why he had bowed to the blade earlier, and why he had remained so calm through an alert that had unsettled nearly everyone else in the room. When the lesson resumed, Professor Dole spoke briefly about the importance of understanding history through the intentions behind it, rather than fear of its surface. She did not mention the blade again directly, but I noticed several students glancing toward the case throughout the rest of the class, seeing it differently than they had at the beginning of the hour. By the time the session ended, the mood in the auditorium had shifted entirely. What had begun as discomfort and quiet judgment had become something closer to respect, not only for the blade itself, but for the calm, steady way Kellen had carried himself through both the artifact and the alert that followed. As we filed out of the hall, Sarah walked beside me, still processing everything that had happened. "I thought humans were supposed to be unpredictable," she said. "That is what I was taught." I thought about Kellen's steady hands around the blade, his quiet explanation, and his simple answer about staying calm during the alert. Maybe unpredictable was never the right word, I said. Maybe it was just untested. Sarah did not answer right away, but I could tell she was thinking the same thing I was. I walked out of that lecture hall with a different understanding of history, of composure, and of the quiet human who had said very little across 3 full cycles, yet had shown more in a single hour than most of us managed to show in months. Some lessons come from lectures. That one came from watching a single person choose calm over fear, twice, in front of an entire class that expected something else entirely. I have never forgotten it since.